You're listening to episode 219 of Lifestyle Locker Radio with Fleet Maull. Hi, I'm Dr. Josh Hand, and I want to welcome you to Lifestyle Locker Radio. It is here where we talk all things lifestyle, from fitness to nutrition, peak performance to longevity, awesome relationships to inspirational stories. We take you on an amazing journey to all things life and lifestyle. Enjoy the ride. And for today's guest, if you want to learn more than they're going to tell you on this show, I urge you to scroll down, check out the show notes to get a detailed bio and everything you need to know about our guest today. We also encourage that you comment, review, and share this show if you are enjoying it from wherever and whenever you're listening. Lastly, we encourage you to check out all the links that we provide in the show notes. They are there for you, for your health, for your lifestyle. We ultimately want you to unleash your human potential. So dive into this episode. We'll see you on the inside. Hey everyone, welcome back to Lifestyle Locker Radio. We have an amazing guest who's had an amazing life journey that I really think you're gonna enjoy, and I truly know you're gonna get a lot out of this, especially the time when and where we're recording. Things are crazy in this world, and I think you're gonna have some peace of mind after this podcast. So Fleet, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Josh. Great to be here.
Yeah. So Fleet, I want to really bring people back to your past. You 15 or how many years or 14 years in prison. I want you to go into this, like the state of mind and where you were in life, what brought you there. And then now, being a consultant and an author, I mean, you've really transformed your life in a very powerful, positive way. So I want you to bring people on that journey, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. It's a big part of who I am today, obviously. And, I'm not proud of how I got myself there, but I am proud of what I did with my time there and how that set me up to really, really thrive in life since then. So, I'll give a little bit of background. I was someone that grew up in the 50s and 60s, came of age in the 60s, and typical angry young man for lots of reasons. I grew up in a relatively good middle class Midwestern Roman Catholic family. I had that kind of pre-Vatican II Roman Catholic education, if people are familiar with that. Mm-hmm. I had nuns, and they kept telling me I was going to go to hell most of the time. And but we had some alcoholism in my family, and I think I ended up with a pretty big hole in my gut, and just kind of typical angry young man, and disillusioned by a lot of things. I kind of just stopped believing in the culture that was being presented to me with the Kennedy assassinations and the civil rights movement and just everything, the King assassin. I just lost faith in what I was being told to believe in, right, in terms of our culture. And so I was kind of angry and lost, and graduated from high school in 1968, one of the most tumultuous years in our country's history. And then I just went headlong into the counterculture of that time. Went to university, but I really majored in drug, sex, and rock and roll, and anti-war politics, and all the rest of the craziness. And but I was always a spiritual seeker. I don't know why. I just always was. I was always interested in the mind and spiritual growth and spiritual development. And so eventually I ended up leaving the country when Nixon was reelected. I just wanted to get out of the country. I also wanted to get away from the drug scene, and was traveling in Latin America, ended up living as an expat down there, and fell into small-time drug smuggling as a way to live outside the system. And I justified it with all this us versus them thinking, right? The hypocrisy of society and, all that kind of stuff. Fortunately, I eventually got beyond that, but it took me a long time. But at any rate, so that's what I was doing, but I was still always sort of pursuing this. And I eventually heard about a Tibetan Buddhist meditation master, and that's kind of the path I'd zeroed in on my interest, who started a university. It was then called Naropa Institute. He founded it in 1974 in Boulder, Colorado. And I was living way up in the Andes Mountains in a remote valley in Peru. And I saw that. I knew I had to go there. So I went there, got a master's degree there in contemplative psychotherapy, a 3-year clinical training program, and really transformative part of my life. but I still had this shadow thing going on. I was still, going back to South America once or twice a year and doing a smuggling run. And I was smuggling cocaine, and I justified that at that time, like everybody was doing it. It's a social drug. And, I wasn't acknowledging how harmful it was. And, I just had all these justifications. And inside, I knew this didn't make sense. I was starting to really pursue a Buddhist path. And I knew that those two didn't fit. But, and I spent about half the year going to programs and retreats, traveling with my teacher. I was very fortunate to end up in a close relationship with him, but as one of his attendants, and students. But I kept secret this other shadow life I had.
Oh, wow.
Until it all came crashing down on me. And I never really tried to get rich at it, but I just kind of did it as a way to live outside the system and not really dealing with life. And I was married, and my son was born, and then my marriage fell apart. No surprise with everything I had going on. And, so I kept my problems at bay with the money. That's how I didn't deal with things. I just made enough money doing a periodic smuggling runs that I could, pay for this, pay for that, keep my problems at bay. And I was just around all the cognitive dissonance I was experiencing with all that. I just self-medicated, with alcohol and drugs and so forth. So I just kind of split life. I spent about half my year doing good things and involved in deep training, and another half of the year being this crazy person. It was just, and eventually I earned my way into a 14-year federal prison sentence. And but actually, to begin with, I thought it was going to be much worse than that. Other people, I actually quit. I quit, but other people I've been involved with kept going, and they got in trouble with the law, and they decided to invite me to the party, so to speak. And I kind of heard about things. I knew this was coming, and I was trying to decide what to do, whether to go on the run or stay and face it. And it was actually my spiritual teacher who counseled me to stay and face it. And that was kind of the first time I ever took anybody's advice. I was pretty scared about being on the run, but I was also scared as hell of going to prison and having nightmares about it and everything. But when I was indicted, I did turn myself in. And they were threatening to put me away for 30 years to life. And so, one of the really real decision points I came to was after going through my trial. I went to trial just because I was charged with this so-called kingpin statute, because basically I refused to cooperate. My values didn't let me trade my time for somebody else's. And so basically, since I didn't cooperate, they put me in a center, and anybody I'd ever met was the network, and I became the kingpin. But I was not any kind of kingpin. I wish I was. I might still have a Swiss bank account. I don't. Just kidding. But no, I was absolutely broke by this time. I was broke. I was a broke kingpin, kind of ridiculous. And so anyway, I went through trial, got convicted, and I was awaiting sentencing, and they had me in a county jail. And the night before my sentencing, they had me in a suicide watch isolation cell. Now, I wasn't suicidal, but I was really anxious, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
I couldn't sleep, and I was up all night. And I remember, and there were lights on in it, so it would have been hard to sleep anyway. And not long before dawn, I remember I just desperately wanted to see outside. And there was a small window up high on the wall, one window on the wall of the cell. And I climbed up on this, built-in toilet they have, built into the cell. I climbed up there and on a sink, I could get out and just peer out there, and I could see some stars out there. And in that moment, something just rose up in me, and I just had this crystal clear commitment that regardless of what happened the next day, and I was facing a no parole sentence. I was convicted of a no parole. They used to have parole back then in the federal system. They don't now, but they did then, which meant after serving 1/3 of your sentence, you will become eligible for parole. Doesn't mean you get it necessarily, but you become eligible. But the count I was convicted of, one of the counts, the so-called kingpin statute, carried a no parole sentence. And I was facing anywhere from 10 to life. And if I got life, I would still be there. That's life with no parole. I would still be there. The only thing that can get you out of that is a presidential pardon. And, that's not going to happen. So that's what I was facing. And I was scared to death. But just this commitment rose up in me that I don't care what happens tomorrow. I'm not going to give up on myself. I'm not going to give up on my son, who was 9 years old then. I'm not going to give up on my life. And it was just absolutely crystal clear. And I got back down, sat in my bunk, and just a kind of calm and peace came over me. And later that day, I was sentenced. I was sentenced originally to 30 years, no parole. And the paper the next day said I'd be 65 before I'd have any chance of being released. I was 35 years old then. So I pretty much thought my life was over as I'd known it. And I really hit the wall of what I'd done to my son, who was 9 years old, who was going to grow up without a dad, and what I'd done to myself, and how I'd let my family down, and my spiritual community and teachers. And so I just went to a real dark night of the soul. And but that commitment stayed with me. That commitment stayed with me.
So that's one heck of a story. Having that sensation, knowing that you have the potential to be there for your pretty much your full adult life, until we'll call like our retirement age, and having a son, not being able to see you possibly for all of those years. How did it get chunked down from, that possible 30 year that they were talking about to the 14?
Yeah, well, fortunately, if you were sentenced prior to 1987, I was sentenced in 1985. They call that the old law. They still, you received a lot of good time by law. So on a sentence more than 10 years, if you stayed out of trouble, you received, I think, 10 days a month statutory good time. So you just computed that off the end of your sentence.
Okay.
And then also, if you kept a job, you didn't have to do a good job, but if you kept a job, you got what they called extra good time, and you earned that as you went. So it took me a while to figure all that out. I mean, I was in federal prison for at least 6 months before I even figured all that out. And then I realized that on that 30-year sentence, I would serve 18 and a half if I kept a job and stayed out of trouble. And because if you get in trouble, they start taking the good time away from you in chunks. And a lot of people get in a lot of trouble in prison and end up doing it. They call it day for day. They don't get any of their good time. They do it day for day. So also, of course, I appealed my sentence, and that took about 2.5, 3 years to go through the courts. And they ended up dropping one count, which actually should have got me a new trial, but it didn't. But at any rate, they dropped one count, and that reduced my aggregate sentence from 30 to 25. And so then at that point, I knew I'd served 14 and a half if I stayed out of trouble. And it still felt like forever. But that's what I ended up serving, 14 inside the prison, and then 6 months outside, 3 months of that in a halfway house, and 3 months in house arrest. I was with an ankle bracelet, that kind of day reporting kind of thing. So that's what I ended up serving. And but I was 14 years in that federal prison. And where I ended up doing my time was the U.S. Medical Center for Federal Prisoners, which is in Springfield, Missouri. My case was in St. Louis, Missouri, which in itself was a tragedy because that's where my family was from, and they were relatively prominent, had a family business that was well known. And I had left a long time ago. I was the black sheep of the family, and I, had rules about not being involved there, but I broke all the rules that I had one way or another. But they were able to establish, by one small thread, they were able to establish a reason to have the case in St. Louis. And they wanted it there because they got all the publicity out of it. So it was a huge scandal for my family, which is something I still deeply regret. And so anyway, I thought I was probably going to go to Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary with the sentence I had, but I got lucky and got sent to this U.S. Medical Center, which is the maximum security medical center in the federal prison system for both medical and psychiatric care. So they had about 600 medical patients, about 400 psychiatric, and then about 300 regular inmates there just to help run the place. And I was in that group. They called it the work cadre. And all the patients that came there were from the federal penitentiaries, the highest security penitentiaries like Lewisburg and Leavenworth and Atlanta and Lompoc and so forth. And so it was a rough place. It wasn't as rough as one of those penitentiaries because these guys were there for medical care and psychiatric care, but it was still a rough place. The general population that I was part of was medium security. So some people were sentenced into it like me, and other people worked their way down from the penitentiaries with good behavior. But there were killings while I was there. There were constant fights, stabbings. It was a dangerous enough place and incredibly overcrowded. I lived on a unit designed for 180 men. I mean, 100 for 50 men, excuse me. And we had 180 men on that unit,
Oh,
and
wow.
no air conditioning in the summer, southern Missouri. So the place was a powder keg. It was just every moment of the day, around any corner, you could easily get in a beef of some kind, and your life could be at risk. So it was a very charged atmosphere.
Wow.
And so that's where I ended up doing my time. But uh, there was some good fortune in that, actually, because I was in county jail going through trial and sentencing for 7 months, and that was a hellhole that I was in, just constant noise, and I couldn't sleep, and it was just this concrete block cell with no windows, and
Mm.
it was a hellhole.
Yeah.
But when I got to the federal prison, it was big, and there was, I could get a job, and there was a recreation area and prison yards, and it felt like a tremendous relief to get there. But also, I was immediately struck with the amount of suffering because, I saw the men coming in and out of the psychiatric wing, the ones that could get out to go to rec and so forth. And a lot of times they're doing the Thorazine two-step, or, they're out in the yard and they're talking to trees. I mean, one day they seem fine. The next day they switch their medication and they're all messed
Mm.
up. And then I saw the patients from the hospital. I saw men who were blind being assisted walking around. I saw men who were paraplegic and quadriplegic in wheelchairs being wheeled out to the yard, and just so much suffering. And as you can imagine, I was really caught up in the drama of my own situation at that time, facing this big sentence, and thinking my life is pretty much done as I'd known it, that I'd just completely torched my life. And but when I saw all this suffering, it just shook me out of that. And I really became much more concerned about what was going on there and how could I serve. Fortunately, I'd had a tremendous amount of training, good values from my family, despite our family issues. And then the training I received from my Tibetan meditation master, who, just as far as I ever saw, just served humanity 24/7 his whole life. So I had that kind of inclination, and I just set about figuring out how I could serve in that environment. So it became a powerful environment for my path of transformation and service, which is unique because, and I always say this to people, because most people unfortunately come out of prison worse than they went in. It's a terrible environment. Our prisons, unfortunately, it's all shame and blame and punishment and very little rehabilitation. There are some good programs here or there, but they're not the norm. And they're really terrible environments. And most people come out worse than they went in. I was lucky. I went in with a lot of skills and a lot of support. And so I was able to use that as a really powerful path of transformation, and also show up and serve in that environment.
Yeah, so I want to go back for a second. So when you're sitting in that county jail cell with that little itty bitty window, like trying to just get that peak of life outside the prison, and it's almost like the universe tapped you on the shoulder and gave you this download and to let you know that things are going to be okay and be at peace with it. So we have that happen, and then we shift into that federal penitentiary where you said like around any corner like something could happen, and with your meditation training, with your studying that you did in between that the smuggling, I think just as an outsider, I think when you went in, you have an opportunity that a lot of the men and women that were probably there did not have in between your ears. And when did you really start to notice when you were in that federal prison? Was it early on that you go, you know what, like I'm going to make some big changes in myself and hopefully help some of these men and women that are suffering?
Oh, it was immediate, because first of all, I was just absolutely devastated about what I'd done to my son. And so I was really desperate to create any kind of legacy for him better than just his dad went to prison, or maybe even his dad died in prison, because I had no surety that I would survive this
Mm.
time. So I was really motivated. I also knew that, I've been training in a Buddhist path, a spiritual path, and a meditation focused path already at that time for more than 10 years. But I realized I had completely ignored the ethical foundation of that path. I've been focused on the awareness aspects and the mind aspects. And I realized that I needed to focus my life around the basic precepts in the Buddhist tradition, which are all about non-harming.
Okay.
and uh there's 5 lay precepts, typical kind of religious ideas, right, of non-harming, of not killing, not lying, not stealing, not engaging in the inappropriate sexuality or abuse or inappropriately engaging
Hmm.
in intoxicants and things like that. Those are the basic lay precepts. And, it's basically, fundamentally, it's about not causing harm. And and so I decided I needed to ground my life in prison completely in those precepts. I also just had a clear insight that any good I was going to be able to do in there was going to come out of my actual practice. So I started practicing literally like my hair was on fire. I was practicing hours every day and many more hours on the weekends because I knew it was good. I really had I'd been kind of a program practitioner. I'd done a lot of retreats, had a lot of powerful meditation experiences. I never really had a great daily practice because my life was so crazy, but I had spent, thousands of hours in retreats and practice. So I had a lot of experience. I was well trained. I'd been trained as a teacher already, but I didn't have that good daily discipline. So I knew I had to become a daily practitioner with a really strong practice, and any good I was going to do would come out of that. So I became really focused on that. The other thing was that I immediately noticed what an incredibly negative environment that I was in, and that the minute you met another prisoner, basically that the usual ritual is you exchange your victim stories. You might be walking on the yard, you meet somebody, hi, and he starts talking about how he got screwed over by his lawyers, and then you talk about how you got screwed over by your lawyers. And I went through that ritual one or two times, and I was like, I don't want to hear
Yeah.
my story anymore. I don't really want to hear their stories, but that's not very compassionate. But I just realized that you know, all the prisoners in there, you just ask the right question and scratch the surface, and you get pours all this anger and bitterness and victim mindset and victim narrative. And you know, society thinks of these people as the perpetrators, but of course they all feel victimized. And actually most of them were severely victimized in their childhood. That's how they got where they were.
Yeah.
And then they feel, in many cases over prosecuted, unjustly prosecuted. There's a lot of injustice and a lot of racism in our criminal justice system. So there's a lot of anger. And I knew that I didn't want to come out of prison angry and bitter with a big victim story. And I didn't want to live that way while I was there. And I realized that the only way through that experience and out or beyond that experience for me was going to be to embrace 100% or 200%
Yeah.
responsibility for having got myself in that situation. And of course, I knew that I, made the choices that got me there. But there were a lot of people that helped me, end up in the sentence I got. A lot of my, people testified against me, former friends, associated, one in particular who I thought was a close friend. And then the government, they don't play by the rules when they prosecute you. They play hardball and they break all their own rules. But so I could have had all those stories in my head. And I made a clear decision, just forget about all that and just focus on, I got myself into this, I got to get myself out of it. And that really started to become the basis for this model today that I call radical responsibility.
Yeah. So I wanted to go through that. So as you're going through your sentence, as you're choosing the positive side of, listen, I'm not going to go into this victim mentality. I don't really want to hear it all day, every day, because I don't want that programmed into my brain. And, fast forward now, we have the book, right? The radical responsibility book. When did that concept, as we're going through the process of this 14 and a half or 14-year sentencing, when did it really become aware that this is something that I'm building inside? Now I need to really put it on paper. I need to get this out so we can start to impact and help more people.
Yeah, well, I only finally got the book out last year, I guess, in 2019. So it
Yeah.
took me a long time to get it down on paper. But, a lot of things contributed to the model, and it was definitely emerging in prison. I immediately got a job in the prison school. Somebody the first day I was there said, "You get yourself a job, otherwise you end up working in the kitchen." So I went to the school. I had a master's degree. They hired me. So I taught school for 14
Oh,
years,
wow.
which was very rewarding. I helped men get their GED in English and Spanish because I'm bilingual, and I helped men learn to read. And I helped men study correspondent college courses. So I
Mhm.
worked full time in a prison school. That was my 9 to 5 job, 5 days a week. And that was very
Wow.
rewarding, also very challenging because, most of they called us the inmate tutors. And we were the teachers and the instructors, but most of them, my fellow tutors would go hide in a corner and they tell the guys, "Hey, if you need help, I'll help you, but otherwise I'm not going to bother you," because they were afraid, right? Because you're working with your fellow prisoners, and you got to be really careful there. Who do you think you are, the police? And then back on a unit, we didn't have locks on our doors. The smallest guy in a place can kill you when you're sleeping, right? So
Yeah.
but I didn't want to do that. I wanted to add value to people's lives, and I had to figure out how to get in relationship with these guys and challenge them to learn and challenge them. And a lot of them were really angry. Like being in school made them really angry because school had always been a nightmare for them. And they actually were forced to study, or they'd send them to the hole. So somebody refused, they go to the hole, they come back, they're more angry, they go to the hole again, they're more angry. And now I'm sitting there trying to deal with them, a fellow prisoner, right? And I screwed up 5 or 6 times and ended up in a potentially dangerous conflict. But I learned, and I learned I had to really slow down and get in relationship with each one. So I learned a lot over 14 years doing that teaching work. And I also, I started a meditation group in the prison chapel. They didn't want me to start one, but I kind of by osmosis, I got it going there, and then led a meditation group that met twice weekly there for 14 years. I knew I needed to deal with my own substance abuse issues, and thank goodness there was a good AANA 12-step group there, and I immediately got involved in that and was very involved in that for 14 years. And then because men were dying there, this was a federal prison hospital. This is 1985. The AIDS epidemic is going into full swing, and they were bringing all the AIDS patients there from all the federal penitentiaries. And so another inmate and myself got a hospice program started with the support of some staff. And it was the first hospice program in a prison anywhere in the world, as far as we know. We got that started in 1987. And so another big part of my life for the rest of my time there was caring for men who are dying. I spent most of my meal breaks up there, and some time in the evenings and time on weekends. And I usually had 2 patients, sometimes 3. That was a little much, but I was just visiting them every day and, helping feed them if they couldn't feed themselves, helping them write letters, helping correspond with their families, some case bathing them, cleaning them up, doing all the psychosocial care and all the bed care, the stuff that the nurses didn't do, because a lot of times they just leave somebody laying in their own urine and feces for hours. And so that was a huge part of my life, very transformative. To focus on someone else's needs is probably the most transformative thing you can do. So, I had all those things, and I was getting a lot of new programs started and everything. And this is kind of where the model of radical responsibility really comes out of. So this is a maximum security prison. Sociologists call it a total institution, which means it's like a totalitarian state. So resistance is futile. If you tried to buck the system there, literally you'd end up back in a psych ward on a concrete bunk, 4-point restraints, naked, getting hosed down at night, being pumped full of Halidol and Thorazine. I mean, literally. So you could not buck the system. So how do you get anything done there? And when you asked any staff person, could we try this? Could we try that? The answer was always no. And if you were audacious enough to ask why, which was enough to get you in trouble with some staff, they always had a story. Well, we tried that before, some inmate abused it, we don't do it anymore. We don't, they always had a story. So how do you get anything done in that environment? I ended up starting 2 national organizations there. And I don't say that to pat myself on the back. I just point to what's possible when we focus on radical responsibility. Because I wasn't focused on, not that I'm not aware of or concerned about injustice and justice. I was just concerned about, how do I get stuff done? What's the most skillful way to interact with these people to get stuff done? And I found that by being consistent, professional, respectful, I could eventually find ways to enroll people in, and staff even, in supporting new types of programs, including that hospice program, and then the meditation programs. And I started lots of adult continuing education classes. Towards the end of my time, about 4 years before I got out, we brought in this program called The Event, which is where a big core of the radical responsibility model comes out of. And we did 4 of those before I got out. So all of this came out of really operating from this place of, no matter how bad the circumstances are, no matter how unjust or how terrible or how uncomfortable or how horrific, just operating from this question, what can I do? Okay, this sucks, but what can I do? What's the most creative way to approach this situation? So living in that mind of possibility and creativity, I was able to do all kinds of things that prisoners are not supposed to do there, including starting 2 national organizations, which catalyzed 2 national movements, which are flourishing today. So it all comes out of this perspective of not getting lost in that victim mindset, instead operating in a mindset of possibility and focused on, every challenge we're facing in life is an opportunity for growth and to move forward and to thrive. But to do so, you have to operate in the mindset of possibility, not in the mindset of limitations or the victim mindset.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you had like this radical compassion project start while you were there, like, a hospital. I mean, that's really, I mean, that really gets down to like the heart of a human being. I don't mean the physical heart, but to get to a place where you are like giving for the sense of giving. You're not doing it because you're getting something in response. You're helping other people get out of the hole that they're in. And that says a lot. And I think or at least I can imagine being in that situation, the transformation that you got by giving, by serving, by loving these people, must have been just a huge part of your overall growth. I can only imagine, as a full-time chiropractor, I'm not seeing hospice patients, right? But I've seen people with some serious things, and that alone is, for me, is powerful, let alone someone that's in hospice care. And I'm sure everybody listening has been in a room with someone who's sick, who's ill, who's dying, who's been in hospice. And it is not an easy place to be in mentally. So, I mean, I applaud you for that. I mean, that's unbelievably powerful.
Thank you. And you're absolutely right. It was incredibly transformative. I mean, I was involved in a lot of transformational work and really totally committed to working on myself. I was living this kind of monastic lifestyle in a federal prison, focused on my own practice, my own study, service. I probably practiced 2-3 hours every day. I studied for 3 hours a day. And then I was, teaching meditation, doing 12-step work, doing a hospice volunteering. So I was very disciplined and also kept in shape, and, I had a very, very disciplined life. And so all this contributed, but being involved in the hospice care, for one, as you described, where we shift our needs off ourselves, not in self-denial, but just, okay, I'm coming up to this, my person who they became, they would really become our friends. And I'm coming into their room and this is their time. I need to set myself aside a little bit and really focus on this person who's in a much worse situation than I am. They're dying in prison. And so just that act is incredibly transformative, and igniting that natural compassion and empathy that we all have within us. But then also facing your own mortality, because, I knew that there, but for the grace of whatever one believes in, go I. Because, I had hospice patients that were much younger than I am, that were dying of AIDS. And that, is really always tragic, being with someone whose life is ending so young. Some were the same age as I was, and some were older, dying of AIDS or cancer or different liver disease and so forth. And it was really clear to me. In fact, we had 2 hospice volunteers. One who was a very close friend of mine. When either one of his patients or one of mine would die, we often go spend time together in prayer and meditation and just conversation. And we were very different. I was a Buddhist. He was an evangelical Christian. But even though theologically we were very different, we somehow found a real connection there. We're very close. And he eventually got sick and had cancer and ended up dying there, became a hospice patient. And I wasn't his volunteer, but I was very close to him. And then there was another guy, an African-American man named Charlie, who was a hospice volunteer, who then got sick and became a hospice patient. And I was his volunteer. I was Charlie's hospice volunteer. And so, we knew that there was no guarantee that we were getting out. So, and, if you're not around death, you can kind of ignore that. But when you're visiting people who are terminally ill and dying every day of the week, you're confronted with your own mortality. So that is also very transformative. And
Yeah.
I feel deep gratitude for that opportunity I had to do that service. And one of the things that we really emphasize in the prison work, because my life today has a number of different domains, but a major part of my life is still taking this work back into prisons, as well as working with correctional officers and police and the whole criminal justice system. But we emphasize in all our programs, not only mindfulness and mind training and mindfulness-based emotional intelligence training and all of that is very important, but we really emphasize service. We always encourage prisoners to find some way to engage in some kind of service, because I just really believe in the transformative power of service.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at the full name of the book, and I want everybody just listen for a second. And this is in a nutshell, like this whole story we've just spoken about: radical responsibility, how to move beyond blame, fearlessly live your highest purpose, and become an unstoppable force for good. I mean, I don't think you could have even picked a better title for this book based on this journey you've been on. So I'm just going to pause for a second, let everybody know. Make sure you do check the show notes. This is going to be a book that's transformative. It's paper you're reading, but if you embody the message, it's something that can make some big changes, hopefully internally for you, to help you become that force for good, or even a better version of that force for good, for yourselves. So Fleet, let's shift gears for a second. Let's jump into, modern times here, where we are now, not into the past. So you have the book, you're working with prisons. You have a lot of moving pieces. Are you working with individuals? You working with groups? What does this look like now?
Well, I kind of have two sides of my professional life. I have the nonprofit side. So I founded one of the nonprofits I founded while I was in prison. Uh, was originally called Prison Dharma Network. That's still a legal name, but we have 4 divisions now. Prison Mindfulness Institute, which brings mindfulness-based programming to at-risk, incarcerated, and returning youth and adults, or incarcerated citizens. Then we have Mindfulness and Public Safety, which brings mindfulness-based programming, mindfulness-based wellness and resiliency programming to public safety professionals, correctional officers, probation officers,
Great.
police, and so forth. We have the Engage Mindfulness Institute, where we train mindfulness teachers in trauma-informed approaches to mindfulness. So I'm very involved in that. We also work with the courts through something called mindful justice. So that's a big part of my life. I'm the founder. We have an executive director, and I'm a trainer in the organization and the research director, and it's a big part of my life. I was very involved in that this week. I led a Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. I was leading all-day trainings for probation and parole officers up in Canada on Zoom. We're doing a lot on Zoom now because of COVID-19. But then I have my for-profit business, my seminar business, and my speaking career, and my consult. I've been a business consultant ever since I got out, and I do a lot of executive coaching. And I have lots of online classes, and we're doing big summits. We did the Global Resilience Summit back in May with 32,000 people online, and 47 amazing speakers talking about individual, relational, collective, systemic resilience that we need to go through what we're all going through right now. We've got another big summit coming up in January called The Best Year of Your Life, to help people launch 2021 in the best way possible. So those are the kind of spheres of my life. But I'd like to mention just one thing that I think could be really helpful to people, because we've all had moments when we're down, right? When we crash, and some of us have maybe everything has fallen apart on us at one time or another, or we just feel very limited by our circumstances, or and so forth. We have a lot of reasons why maybe we don't step into our dreams, or really try to go after what we want in life. So in 1999, I got out of prison finally. I was in a halfway house and then under house arrest for 6 months. I couldn't leave the county. I was in Boulder, Colorado. I couldn't leave the county. I couldn't leave the state for about a year. And I was in debt. I thought I owed a lot of money to the IRS. And I was just shy of my 50th birthday. And I was an ex-con. And actually my record painted me up to be like a very serious criminal, right? So how do you start your life at 50, broke, in debt, and ex-con? And but I'd worked really hard while I was in, so I was kind of prepared. But I got out, and I had a friend who had brought that training program called The Event into the prison. I helped him bring it in. And there's some core things in radical responsibility. This distinction between the drama zone and the empowerment zone, and working with Stephen Cartman's drama triangle. That's where I encountered those, was in the event training. Well, he had a consulting and training business, and he offered me a job. I thought I would go on the road training with him, but I couldn't leave the state. And he didn't have any work in Colorado. So I just had to try to start my own business. So I'm very grateful. He did set me up with an office and give me a small stipend for 6 months. But he said, at the end of 6 months, you're on your own. That's all I can do. And so it took me about 6 months, and I got my first client and my first consulting gig. And I've had consulting clients ever since then. And, within a year or so, I'm traveling the world, teaching meditation, doing consulting, doing the prison work, and leading seminars and speaking at conferences around the world. And I've never looked back, and my life has just thrived. And I've worked really hard. None of that fell off trees. I've worked really hard to establish myself as a respected professional. But it's possible. I mean, you can't be more at the bottom of the barrel than I was, and I was just committed. And I realized that life is about continually training ourselves, so we have more to give, more to offer, and so it's possible. I'm not patting myself on the back here. I just want people to see that if we really want to go for it, and I realize that people can be in some horrible circumstances, and there can be a lot of injustice involved in some of those circumstances. But you can find countless stories of people who have been in the worst possible circumstances and found a way to pick themselves up and create a life for themselves. So, to the extent that my life bears witness to that, that's one reason I'm willing to share my story. Otherwise, I just not talk about it that much.
Yeah, I mean, you really had to get into the darkest spot. I mean, and you saw you saw the light, like you saw like a glowing star of light. I mean, and you chased it down, and it shows. I mean, to go from a maximum security prison to being a business consultant, to being an author, to inspiring people, having 32,000 people on a live summit about being, better human beings. Like that's very powerful. So for those that are listening, like Fleet just said, no matter where you are in your life, whether you're 16 and in trouble with whatever, or you're 65, like you can get out of dark places. Just got to put in the work. You got to know that there is that light at the, I don't want to say the end, but there's that light you can chase to create some greatness for yourself and people around you. So Fleet, I mean, I appreciate your story. It's very powerful. And I think you're just hitting the tip of the iceberg.
Even if you're older, I'm 71 years old.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome.
I started a new business. I should be moving into retirement. I started a new business last year. I'm starting a whole digital marketing. I'm mastering how to do marketing online, and I'm building seminars and online courses and virtual summits. I've got a partner in it, and I've been wanting to do it for a couple of years. I launched it last year when I was 70 years old, and it's emerging. We're starting to succeed, and I know it's really going to emerge. So that's 70 years old. It's never too late.
Yeah, there you go. Right. And so let's talk for a second before we finish up. I want to talk about this summit that you have coming up in January. Fully virtual. It's online. And we'll have we're gonna have all the details in the show notes on how people can get registered for that. What does it look like? When someone's going to be registering, what are they going to be able to look forward to? Like you speaking, lots of people teaching. What's it going to be like?
Well, excuse me, it's a 10-day summit, and if you register, and it's free, each day there will be 5, 6, 7 speakers. The first day is going to be about life purpose and vision, getting clear about our life purpose and our vision, and getting motivated, to actualize our dreams. And the second day will be about health and well-being, because without our health, we can't do much.
Of course.
Then there'll be a day on productivity, performance, mindset, this growth mindset. And there'll be a day on learning the science of change, of habit formation, and what makes us tick, and how we actually create the change that we need to move forward in our lives, to level up different domains of our life. There'll be a day focused on relationships, personal, professional, intimate relationships. There'll be a day focused on spirituality, spiritual growth. There's like different themes each day. So each day if you're registered, you have access to 4, 5, 6, 7 of these video teachings, and you have 48 hours access to those, and the next day is another set and another set, but you only have 48 hours access to each set. But if you were really into it, you could probably watch a lot of them during that period, and but you can, and the way that we pay the expenses of putting something on like this, we offer what's called the lifetime access package that gives you all the summit content plus a lot of bonuses. And so a certain percentage of people do that because they want to be able to, see all this great material and make use of the material. And we share all that with all kinds of affiliates and co-sponsors and our speakers and everything. So it's really just a way to create a really big event and a win-win situation for everybody involved, and make it free for a lot of people. And then, but what's going to be unique about this, it's going to be an annual event to kick off the year each year, right? And
Yeah, that's great.
because we all do those New Year's resolutions, but we usually don't follow through on them, right? So this is going to be all the inner science and outer science of how you actually do not only have the aspiration to create change and evolution and progress in your life, but how you actually do it. And then it's going to be lots of follow-up programs. We're going to offer people to get involved in coaching programs, individual, group coaching. So it's really going to become a whole community focused
Yeah, it
on
sounds like it.
people who are inspired to take their life to the next level in whatever way.
That's great. And I think that I encourage everybody, get in on it. If it's free to start, just, you're going to learn something. I can promise you. I've taught on summits, and they are so powerful. Just to see people's lives, like you saw through your journey through prison, like people can change. And when people are in super dark places, they can change. So the people that are probably registering for this are maybe not that far down that rabbit hole of darkness. So they have a lot of potential to jump quick and make some really impactful change in their lives. I've seen it time and time again in my practice through people I work with. And I know if you're doing a summit like this, which is, strategically laid out, from the mental, the physical, the health, all of those things are essential. I mean, ultimately, we're on Lifestyle Locker Radio. That's a lifestyle shift program. It's very
Absolutely.
powerful.
It's really going to
So,
be a 10-day journey, and then with a lot of follow-up for people that really want to create those changes in their life. And we also emphasize that it's not about in changing or improving ourselves from a mindset that there's something wrong with us or we're missing something. It's all grounded in a sense of our own innate goodness, innate wholeness, innate resilience. But then just, part of being a human being is to evolve, to grow. So it's just from that place of feeling already good about ourselves, a basic sense of okayness, and okay,
yeah.
how do I just keep evolving and growing as a human being? And a lot of times we just need the motivation, the inspiration, and then the right information. A lot of people talk today about hacking, that computer expression, right? So what are the shortcuts? I mean, there's no secret, formula to easy,
Of course.
but there are shortcuts. There's ways, we can work really hard, but not so smart and not get the growth we're looking for. But if we get some good ideas from people, we can really grow and get better results much more quickly. And so those are the kind of teachers we're going to be bringing that can really help people really focus on the specific things that will help them grow in the areas of their life that they most want to grow in.
Yeah, I think that's very, very, very powerful, Fleet. So for everybody that's listening, in the show notes, we're going to have lots of details, all the ways you can connect with Fleet, from the websites to this actual summit that's going to be happening in January. We're going to make sure you have easy access to get access to all of his content, because making changes in life and taking those next steps are so important, and they're so powerful, because if you're growing yourself, you don't realize that you are like a light bulb that can positively affect people around you. And so this is something that can change, globally, exponentially. And I'm a true believer in that. And Fleet, so I want to thank you so much. This has been a great journey for me, listening to your story live and being able to share this with our audience. I think they're really going to get really a lot out of it.
Well, thank you very much, Josh. And it's always an ongoing journey because, I have my story about what I've done in the past, but that's in the past. I'm still like everybody else. I face my challenges every day, and I'm trying to grow and trying to, it's an adventure, the human life. It's not easy. No small thing being a human being and dealing with everything we have to deal with. So every day you just get up and do your best. And I'm actually more interested in this unfolding journey than whatever I've accomplished in the past. But I hope that what I have been able to do with my life is inspiring to people, and that so I need to get inspired by you. So I'm looking to pass it on so other people can do great things and inspire me.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate my audience. I'm sure we'll appreciate everything that they are able to do to connect with you. I look for the growth of our community, just like you look for the growth of yours. And, this thing will grow exponentially. And I truly believe we are going to leave a better legacy by having a healthier, more conscious, powerful community in this world. So thank you. Hey there, everyone. I hope you did enjoy that episode with Fleet Maull, learning some radical responsibility, your lifestyle, your choice. I think it's so awesome. Make sure you go ahead and check him out on all the links below. There are a lot of them. He's given us quite a bit. Also, make sure you do go ahead and check out the 30-65 Lifestyle Shift program, which is like no other. It's simple, it's powerful, it gets you connected to those around you and allows you to be the best version of yourself. So again, I'm Dr. Josh Hant. That was just Fleet Maull. This is Lifestyle Locker Radio. Peace out.